Observe.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 24 of the Observe and Rapport Show. I'm Kyle Brennan, and we are in a garden.
Yeah, we're in a backyard. Well, those birds are fucking up late, no?
Those birds are
very
late.
This is probably a really bad idea.
I don't know what time they go to sleep, but they're loud
They're
now.
chatting it up.
Hopefully,
they're having dinner or...
Hopefully the people listening on their podcast, for those who don't know, we're sitting in my backyard right now in front of my wife Lauren's lovely garden.
It's very nice. It's very
a gorgeous
scenic.
June day, and we figured why sit in the attic where we're going to
just be
sweat
hot
to death.
and sweaty, and it's such a nice night,
it's
man.
Too nice.
It's so nice out.
So we're lucky to be out here.
Yeah.
That the bugs are biting.
Mm-hmm.
And
this is probably a terrible idea.
Yeah,
it probably looks bad. The lighting's off. Maybe the sound is like all these birds are going to be the only thing anyone can hear. We don't know yet.
I want to hear about. So you just went to Houston.
I did go to Houston, dude. Texas is a different place.
It really
is in
is.
every conceivable way. So I'll just get right to it. I got I went to school and everything, and it was great. First of all, it's hot as fucking balls.
Dude, it's humid down
like
there.
hot.
Yeah.
Like
it's different.
Like it ain't like Florida's not this hot.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the sick. You could take a bite out of the air hot, swampy hot. Prehistoric sized bugs hot.
Yeah.
And so that was like the first thing.
I was in Dallas like a month ago, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Dude, it is. And the guy was like, buddy, in August you don't go outside. You do not go outside in August. Like that kind of thing. Anyway, first day's great. Go to the bar at night with the coworker or whatever, and I get there, and first thing I notice is it smells like cigarettes in here because you can still smoke in bars.
Yeah.
It's insane.
One of the bars we went to in Dallas had a cigarette vending machine in there.
Yeah, this one had it wasn't a vending machine. You can buy them over the bar. You're like, can I get a pack of Camel Crushes? Yeah, honey, no problem. $10. Anyway, that was one thing. And the woman who was smoking this cigarette was also sitting at a slot machine in the bar. Like a working slot machine. I go to the bartender, I'm like, is that a slot machine? She's like, yeah. I'm like, is it like a real slot machine? She goes, what do you mean? I'm like, can you win money? She's like, honey, what's the point of a slot machine? You can't win any money. And I was like, you're right. I mean, that was a dumb question.
Valid.
And she goes, I'm like, that is so cool. That would be so illegal in New York. And she goes, well, it's not really legal here either, but nobody cares, you know? Yeah. So that was like crazy to see. And I actually won $85, cashed out.
Hell yeah.
Bartender came over to me, gave me my money. I was like, what? And she goes, I didn't give this to you. I'm like, right, no problem. But you spend it at the bar. It's free beers. Guess how much a beer is?
Like $4.
$3 for a tap on draft Miller Lite.
Incredible.
$3.
Yeah.
Okay, and I noticed a couple of things. Like, I was talking to some guy, and he goes, buddy, you stick out like a sore thumb. And I was like, oh, is it that obvious? He's like,
well,
it sure is.
Head.
He's like, your accent, what I'm wearing. Like, people are wearing big buckle belts and like the cowboy hat, and they're not like, it's not ironic or weird. It's what they are.
Yeah.
And so I'm wearing like I've got my neck. Like, this is a New York facial hair thing. They don't do that in the South. Everyone's just got a big fucking beard.
That's true.
Or you don't have a beard,
or a big mustache or something.
Yeah. And he goes, where are you from? I told him New York. He goes, let me ask you something. How much you pay to live up there? Like, what's your rent or your mortgage? So I told him, well, I live in a first floor of a house, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, kind of have a yard and a parking spot. We pay, $18.50. He goes, buddy, you're going to hate me. He goes, I got me a 5-bedroom, 2.5 bathroom, 5 acres of land, and a garage for $900 a month.
Oh, my God.
I said, are you serious? He goes, and that ain't all, buddy. And he pulls out this thing. He's got a boat, and his kids have dirt bikes. They're riding, going over hills on the yard. And he's like, buddy, I don't know how y'all do. And I said, how much do you make? He told me it was $7 less than what I make.
Wow.
So he's like, I ain't trying to tell you I'm rich or nothing. I'm not trying to make you feel type of way, but we got it made down here.
Wow.
And I was like, you really do, don't you?
2 of my coworkers when I was down there who are probably, can't be more than 28 years old, 2 of them had Teslas.
Right.
And I was like, what the?
No problem.
Yeah.
It was really something else. And Texas in general, people are much much kinder. Like I said, you can smoke in bars. You can kind of do whatever the hell and dude, the parking lot was like a it was like a dealership for like a Dodge deal. Everyone has a truck.
Oh,
there's
the
no
pickup
cars.
trucks, yeah.
Big truck with the brass balls on the
that's
back.
That's why I was so surprised that my two coworkers had Teslas. So I was like, what's going on?
I know, right?
I thought you had to have a pickup truck down here.
Another thing that happened was there were these two guys there. They were like, where are y'all from? And I said, New York. I said, what are you guys doing here? They're like, well, we're just on break. We work down the street at the mechanic, drinking, And I said, I noticed everyone has a beard here. I was like, and it's like a big, bushy beard. It's like a thing down here. He goes, well, me, I'm just lazy. like again, different.
Yeah.
Just a different,
Yeah.
But I can't tell. Even my sister was like, watch, he's going to move there, because it's just, for me, that is the kind of place I'd love to live in. But at the same time, I like the fact that I'm that kind of person in New York still.
Yeah.
Like, I don't fit in here, but, like, I like that too.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't fit in down there either because I ain't country enough, you know? And by the way, it was right next to a ranch, like a literal ranch. Cows and pigs, just, you hear them oinking as you're drinking. It's, like, so fucking cool, man.
Yeah,
I loved it.
It's a cool place. I get this experience anytime. Well, I mean, that's the coolest thing of traveling in the U.S., too, is just the amount
I brought up that story you told on the last episode about how every state has its own laws.
Yeah.
And, like, that's kind of, like, totally applicable to Texas anyway.
The laws in Texas are wild. I found out my coworker, who now lives down there, he's from New York, and he moved down there.
Right.
And he's, like, fascinated with Texas and everything. He's, like, fully obsessed, like, he thinks he's, like, a Texan now, but he's from New York.
I get it. I had a twang by the time I left.
But he told me some interesting facts, and I might not remember fully the context of it, but did you know that the Texas flag is the only flag that's allowed to fly at the same height as the American flag?
I did not know that.
Yeah.
And why?
I forget the reason why.
They were like, well,
know.
that's because that's the way it is, buddy.
It has something to do with the way that Texas was a republic at first, and then they were like...
Aren't they always seesawing, too, with that? Like, we might just fucking...
Yeah. The other thing I didn't know was Six Flags, the amusement park, the full name of it is the Six Flags of the Republic of Texas.
Oh, my God.
Which I didn't know. So Texas was... at one point controlled by 6 different, countries, so it was like Spain, France.
Oh, really? Back
like
in the day.
The U.S., like all these different. So those are like the 6 Flags of Texas.
Oh,
so
wow!
Look that up, listeners, in your in your downtime. I forget exactly what. I just know those facts. I need to know more about them.
That's a good one. I loved Texas.
It's a
really
cool
loved
spot.
it. And the flight there, a lot of turbulence, man. Like, I don't know what the hell that was all about, but
I feel like someone told me recently that apparently flights in general now are experiencing more turbulence.
Well, yeah, everything's, DEI, so nothing works,
No. There was like a
that's what everyone's saying. Anyway.
There was a like normal reason for it.
But
I experienced like the worst turbulence probably of my life. Not that it was
going to Texas?
Insane. Yeah, I think it was going to Texas.
Dude, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And on the way home, not a pip.
Yeah.
Weird. Yeah, but I really loved it. I would move there. Texans, I hope we have at least one listener down there. I told everybody, like in the class in the beginning, the guy was like, our instructor was like, tell me something that's special about each one of you when you go around. And of course, I mentioned the show.
Hell yeah.
Everybody was like, you really got a podcast, huh? I was like, yeah, it's called this, that. Maybe you'll llisten, maybe you won't. They were like, I'll check it out.
It's funny. I've had a few people, whether it's coworkers or people I like barely know, just come up to me and be like, I heard you and your cousin have a podcast. You guys talk about books and stuff.
As common as they are and as much of a meme as it is, like, let's start a podcast. We're 2 white guys.
Yeah.
Like that. But who has one? I don't know anyone with one.
No. Not really.
Like,
or at least not anyone that does it like as consistently. I know a few people who maybe have done like 1 or 2 here or there, but yeah, I mean, it's a cool thing that people tune in and actually give a shit what we're saying.
I think it's fucking great, man. Yeah, what are you reading, pal?
Yeah, so I recently read Ayn Rand's book. You know Ayn Rand?
Yeah, I've heard.
I read her book, The Virtue of Selfishness. Selfishness.
I love being selfish.
Yeah,
I love it.
So when
people got to be more selfish, in my opinion.
Yeah. So Ayn Rand, if you're not familiar, she wrote 2 of what are considered two of the most classic literature books of all time. So Atlas Shrugged and Fountainhead. I read The Fountainhead. Was like very confused by it. It's like an 800-page novel. A lot of like philosophical themes intertwined in it.
Love that.
And it took me a while to understand it, but I slowly got it after a while. And then I went to go start reading Atlas Shrugged because I feel like that's just like a required book that everyone should read. Yeah, it's a great
badass
title. But when I went to open the book, it was a used book that I bought at a library Like the first 50 pages were ripped out.
Oh,
and I was like,
shit.
shit. So luckily,
Oh, what an asshole to donate
Yeah.
the book.
so luckily my coworker actually told me, he was like, you don't even need to read Atlas Shrugged. She has another book that's like 100 pages called The Virtue of Selfishness, which was in my dad's garage. So I just took that.
Joe Brennan book.
Yeah, I don't even know if he ever read it. But The Virtue of Selfishness is basically a nonfiction book explaining her philosophy, which is called objectivism. And it's kind of confusing because the title, you're like, The Virtue of Selfishness, like, good luck trying to argue like why being selfish is good, and that's not really what it's about.
Unless you're half kidding, you know. Yeah,
I think it's more of like a just like clickbaity sort of title. But objectivism was her philosophy, which she writes about the themes in Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, about like man's individual capacity to fulfill his purpose in life through productivity and reason. And she says for centuries, basically, you know, we've been taught through religious institutions and everything to be selfless, to give ourselves to others, and to be altruistic. But she kind of argues the opposite, which is that, you know, man is born with basically like two things that enable his individual freedoms and rights, which are knowledge, the ability to acquire knowledge through productivity and reason, and trade. So the ability to have like a craft or something that you can trade and bring value to yourself, bring value to your family. It's one of those things where like you read it and you don't quite get it, but over time it starts to like sink in a little bit, and you're like, I don't know if I fully agree, but I kind of get what she's saying. And a lot of her writing kind of rails against, because she wrote in like the 1930s to the 60s. So a lot of it is anti-communist, anti-socialist, very pro-capitalism.
Right.
And very pro how the United States was the first country to establish individual rights. And they wrote in the Constitution that you have the right to pursue happiness. So it's not it's not the right to happiness, meaning other people don't have to make you happy, but you have the right as an individual when you're born to pursue happiness however you want. And that's like one of the most unique things.
It's that's the thing that people quote the most. One of those lines that people quote the most from the Declaration, right? It's just like the Constitution, rather, because it really does do a great job of wrapping up what they're trying to do here.
Yeah.
Right. It's not about like, you know, that's what communism promises you. You'll be happy because you're gonna have everything you ever wanted. You don't have to work. You don't have to do nothing. You'll be happy because other people will provide for you what you need. Yeah. But here it's the pursuit. They understand that it's the journey, not the destination. And to have that wisdom that long ago.
Yeah, and it really, she has a chapter. The book itself wasn't great. I think I gave it like a 3.6 review out of 5 or something. But there's 2 chapters about the United States specifically that just totally like changed my perspective on how special the U.S. is. About the fact that like, she really just talks about individual rights and like how that is like the most important thing, that, you know, if you can't own property, then you don't have individual rights. Right. Because that is like the most fundamental part of having individual rights, is being able to own property and say, this is mine and I can do whatever I want on this land, or material goods that I have, I can trade them. I can choose to do with what I want. I can hoard things, or I can develop a skill and trade it for other goods that I don't have. And she says, like, if you're part of a group and have to adhere to that group's rules, then you don't have individual rights. Right. So it's just a really cool idea that I'm still like, you know, fiddling on in my head. But it was very like mind opening, and I'm like, yeah, I kind of see what she's talking about and getting at. And the books, I think the novels are better because she's able to describe that philosophy through characters and through their situations. So like Fountainhead is about two architects. One, you know, followed the path of like, he went to the right colleges and he went to the right firm, and he's like this good-looking, handsome guy that just like goes by the book, and he's ultra successful. And then there's another guy who's like super abstract and like really wild and doesn't listen to rules, and he lost a ton of money and jobs and everything, but he stayed true to his like pursuit of being radically different than everyone else and how he builds buildings. And toward the end, the handsome guy actually goes to the wild guy for advice. Right. He's like, I need advice on like this pitch for architecture and stuff. So it's very much about like staying true to what you think is valuable and not listening to institutions, not listening to what is expected of you, but like having your own virtues and your own sort of like foundation that you adhere to.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
I think that's fantastic. So that the book is The Art of Selfishness.
The Virtue of
Selfishness. You said it's mind opening, and just to get to what I'm reading too, I read on the way to Houston, and while I was there, I read Memories, Dreams, and Reflections by Carl Jung. It's his autobiography.
I think I listened to it on audio. Yeah,
it's his autobiography. It's incredible. Talk about opening your mind, and like it's in the same way of like, I think that we as a culture now kind of take for granted people like him who did so much work, did so much of the digging when it comes to mental illness and what it was treated like before people like him had the insight to like, really try and dig deeply. There's an expression, only the wounded physician can heal you. And it's like, meaning that especially if you're talking about mental illness, like only someone who has the ability to heal themselves. The book starts from when he's a very, very young boy, and like he remembers a lot of things, like from when he was 2 or from when he was like 1.5, and he always, like, he remembers his first dream ever was he was walking, and he could barely walk at the time. He was like 2 or 3, and he walked down this stone staircase underground and saw a red throne, and sitting on the red throne was a cyclops, and it was a giant thing, and it was in a dark underground dungeon, and his mother comes in out of nowhere and says, "That is the man-eater," right? Wakes up, he goes, "I don't know why I remembered that. It was so vivid, that memory, for me for such a long time." And then I found out that my parents were splitting up, presumably because my father had an affair. And it's like the Cyclops is a representation of the penis. It's a one-eyed monster, right? And for his mom to come in and scream at it and say, "That is the man-eater," like basically your dad's dick got him in trouble. Right? And now your father can't be a man and raise his family, and we can't be a unit anymore because he made a mistake. He listened to the Cyclops or whatever. And dude, 2-year-old having that level of insight on something, not that he thought that at the time, but he's like now looking back. So he goes, and also, I didn't know about this, and I had that dream. So that got him into thinking,
the subconscious.
Like, how could I have possibly known that?
Because his whole thing is the subconscious.
Right? And
yeah.
he also believes in in psychic knowledge, meaning that you can receive knowledge from an outside source that you would have never otherwise had an obvious way of getting. So like something was going on in his home, his parents, some kind of a weird issue with their marriage, and it was like seeping into his mind. And he could never have put those things together at that age, right? So that got him into the idea of this. Like there must be something else to the self. It can't just be me. And then he goes, as I got older, when I turned like 6 or 7 or so, I was walking on a trail. He loved nature, always outside, always exploring, whatever. And he goes, I remember it like yesterday, the moment I became consciously aware of what I'm doing. He goes, I was walking, and I remember it before. It was like a hazy, looking through like a foggy window of the world, and then all of a sudden everything was clear as day. And I said to myself, he said, I am me now. Now I am myself. So he's a strange guy.
Yeah.
Right? Like not everyone has those moments. And so then he started to realize, like, well, what was I before then? I was still around talking, doing my thing, like learning, but I wasn't me yet. So what was that before then? And like so then he gets into the idea of the subconscious and the persona and the self, all these different things, these layers to you, whoever you are, right? And as he gets older, I just want to point out a few key things from the book. It was a really good book, great autobiography, and it was written by him and somebody else, by the way. But as he gets older, he got into schizophrenia. He thought schizophrenia was super interesting. He was reading through a textbook and he saw the disease of the disease of the disease of the consciousness or something. The way something was worded, he goes, "That's it. That you can have like a disease in your consciousness in your mind." So he got obsessed with schizophrenia, and he had this patient who was an 18-year-old girl, and she thought she lived on the moon. Like, actually, she believed that. And then through therapy, again, this wasn't like common practice. He was like, let me ask her a lot of questions about her past. Maybe there's something in there I could, dig in. Why is she thinking like this? And it turns out she was sexually molested and abused as a child. And she said that she felt a general humiliation from that forever for the rest of the world. She didn't like going out in public. Anytime she looked in the mirror, she felt shame. Anytime she looked at, obviously, the perpetrator, she felt horrible. Anybody else, she assumed that everyone knew that happened to her because she wasn't aware at the time that she's an individual. You don't develop that knowledge until you're around 4 years old. So that disdain for the world and that feeling of humiliation, she basically just rid herself from reality and lived on the moon. She just placed herself up on the only other place that's far enough away that she knew about. And through therapy and through all that, he was able to bring her back to reality and kind of anchor her here with therapy. But that got him thinking, like, your past, your experiences, that's who you are. Or it at least has a huge influence on who you become. That wasn't always obvious to people. That wasn't always like, well, what happened to you as a child? It used to be like, well, get over it. What's wrong with you?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like who cares? It's over. Let it go. Like that kind of thing. So like that level of it just got him thinking that deeper into it. And so he had to find out a way with other patients who weren't willing to open up. How am I going to get them in a situation where they'll be open to discussing things that maybe even they don't remember, but it's still in there subconsciously. And that's when the mandalas came in. He would have people draw, and that's what my wife does for a living. Is she's an art therapist, meaning that she would have kids draw all the time in the hospital, and then you would ask them questions as they're drawing, and they would say things to you that they would never say if you were just speaking to them one-on-one, eye to eye. Like, because you're in this free kind of flowy creative space, different parts of your brain are working, and he realized that. Like, he had people draw mandalas, and he drew them all the time. There's a whole book in my house, actually, of all of his
is like a mandala art. Is it like you're trying to draw a particular thing, or
you're supposed to, like, there's guidelines to it, I think, like circular, kind of like you have like a foundation of like a circle and you draw within it. Nothing specific. I mean, you can, with art therapy, it's like, draw mommy, draw daddy. And if daddy's bigger than mommy, that could mean a few things. Maybe you look up to your dad more. Maybe you're afraid of your dad. Maybe he's whatever. You got to dig a little deeper. But through all these experiences in his life, he was able to formulate a process to help people open up and kind of, what's the word? When you suppress things, you suppress certain memories, those suppressed memories, you can find them again. And that's when people always go in therapy, they go, I didn't even remember that happened to me.
It's funny.
Isn't that
funny you bring that up because, like, I've been doing therapy for the last 2 years, and it's amazing how often in the session I will be in the midst of just talking and like going through my thoughts, and I'll be just rambling for 15 minutes. And I'll be like, I haven't thought about that in 15 years.
Right.
And like, it's literally, I haven't said anything about it. I haven't and not that I was purposely hiding it. It was just a thing that I was like, oh, I guess I suppressed that.
Yeah.
Never spoke about it to anyone. Not that it was like a traumatic experience, but something minor of like, oh, I never noticed like my brother said it to me that way. Or like, my dad, like, did this thing one time and maybe that's why I feel this or whatever it is. And you're just it's wild how many times that happens over the course of 2 years of therapy.
Without you knowing it.
It's probably happened at least like 24 times where I'm like, damn, how have I never said that before?
And that's just regular everyday shit. Imagine something like traumatic.
Yeah.
You would really suppress it or forget, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
So the book goes on. I want to wrap it up a little bit because it is getting dark. But he does go on to talk about someone, is that like a transformer exploding or something? Oh. So he goes on to talk about how later in life, too, he was actually he was really good at having dreams and, like, kind of, like, purposely having them even. Like, he was a very creative person, so he would have these very vivid, in-depth, whole book story-long dreams. And he got to the point where he was able to talk to characters in his dream consciously or I don't know, however you'd put it. But he had this biblical figure who would always visit him in his dreams called Philomena. I forgot the name.
Yeah, I remember this.
Yes, I forgot the name.
Listened to his audiobook years ago.
Yeah. So he would talk to this figure in his dreams a lot, and all that, and whatever. He would actually go through Freud. His mentor was Freud, and they would evaluate each other's dreams a lot and stuff. And through all of these, experiences in his life with dreams, and he came up with the idea of, not came up with, but he really subscribed to the idea of archetypes, in that there are these recurring characters in everyone's dreams, whether they're phenomena or a dinosaur or like a knife that has its own will or something like that. It's able to move anatomically without someone controlling it, something like that. There are these recurring things and themes that people, everyone, no matter who you are, where you're from, what your experiences are, they all seem to exist no matter what. And we have these, reflections on these characters or these beings. And like that thing, that idea of the archetype, it opened up his mind to the idea of like God and gods or whatever you want to call them. But there are these energies, these psychic influences that like kind of like infiltrate everyone's mind. Even if you're like a super, I don't believe in anything kind of person, atheistic, whatever, nihilistic, you still tend to have these experiences while you're digging into your subconscious as you're dreaming. And so one day he was asked in an interview, do you believe in God? And he said, I don't believe so. I know so. I know so. Because to me, from my experiences, it's obvious that there is another spiritual realm at the very least where other things are at play and are at their will on us. And he just, I would take his word for it, because the guy dedicated his life to how the mind works and the subconscious works and the shadow and all of those horrible places that it can go to. And it was just a really mind-opening book. And I really kind of want to go to therapy now, to be honest with you. Like I got to go get into it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always fascinated. The reason I love therapy is just because I'm fascinated with that kind of stuff. Like, I'm fascinated with psychoanalysis and just like, it's not. Sometimes it's not even for me to heal in any way. I'm just like curious about like, how the mind works and stuff like that. And that's why I'm fascinated. I love reading Jung, and like I follow a Twitter account that just has like Jung quotes, and the amount of times where it's just like, holy shit, type of stuff that he just said in everyday life.
The insight to this is insane. His ability to think in that way, it's like hasn't been mimicked since. He was really important.
Yeah, and it's wild that like psychology as a field hasn't really been around that long. And there's only like a handful of people who were like the pioneers of it. And a lot of the stuff now to us seems obvious. But
that's
like, 100 years ago or so when they were coming out with this stuff, it was like, what? Like, what do you mean? What do you mean your past experiences?
And he also got to the point where he would have visions. Like in 1913, he had a vision of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of dead bodies in a sea of blood. And then a voice spoke to it and said, look upon this. It is wholly real, and there is nothing you can do about it. Without a doubt, this will happen. And then World War I happened shortly after that. So he was like kind of like this receiver of like in outside like knowledge that he would always get in his sleep or through dreams. A lot of his things tended to come true.
It's funny. I always used to look at dreams and like people who would tell me their dreams. I'm like, oh my god.
Well, I don't know if everyone's capable of this. No, but
I definitely put a little more respect into dreams and what they're trying to communicate.
Yes.
Because Jordan Peterson had this quote, I think he said, dreams are, maybe it wasn't him, but they were talking about how dreams are like the perfect mixture of reality and like fantasy. Because if they were fully fantasy, you wouldn't pay attention to them, right? If it was just dinosaurs and like unicorns, like you wouldn't pay any attention because you'd be like, I don't know, my brain's just tripping out. But they have the right amount of like real everyday things and like words that you said or a conversation that you had or characters that you see in your everyday life or settings, places you've been, that it makes you go like, is my own brain trying to tell me something? Is it trying to like decipher and solve some of the riddles that happen throughout the week in
it's
some
like
way?
The sum of all experiences wrapped up in what your brain can't put specifics on anything. So it's like this perfect sum of all of it. And like this is what comes out the other end, and it may not be obvious because it's kind of like these vague representations of things, and like if you can think a certain way, a lot of the time you'll go, oh, maybe I think this about, maybe I feel this about that, and that's why I'm, maybe it's haunting you, or maybe you keep having a recurring dream. Something's trying to communicate with you.
Yeah,
whether you call it your subconscious or you call it an outside, spiritual being, you want to call it a god, whatever you want to call it to, it doesn't really matter. It's still happening, so.
I'm going to do a top 3 that isn't really ordinary, but it's topical. So about a year ago, I gave a speech to
Go on, I'm listening.
I gave a speech to these high school kids in Brooklyn. I got connected to them through a family friend, but these are basically high school kids who they're not, less fortunate. They're not like underprivileged or whatever like that, but they are lost in some way. So they, are lonely or depressed or have addiction issues or, just spend all day playing video. They don't have a lot of meaning and purpose in their life. So I gave a speech to them last year about a lot of the lessons that I've learned through reading and stuff. That was kind of why they brought me in. They're like, this guy reads a lot. Can you share some messages that you've learned through reading and how you've been able to change yourself and, get out of, sort of sadness or, any sort of problems that you've had in your life. So I'm going back to give another speech, and I don't quite know what to talk about yet. I have some ideas, but my top 3 to you would be, what are the top 3 things you would say to this group of high school, they're young men, so 17, 18, 19, that are lost in life? What are the top 3 things that either you've learned from books or personal experience that maybe you would try to communicate and share with them?
I would try to communicate a couple, like the top 3 things. I would personally, I'd make the topic of my talk about religion, but not in that sense that they're thinking.
Well, this actually is a religious organization. So
really?
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense then. I would try to put an effort into, because when I was young, I thought religion was meant to be shoved down people's throats and to make you, not do certain things or else you'll go to hell and that whole thing. And I hated it. I rebelled against it. I was like, that's a bunch of bullshit. I'm an autonomous being, says my forefather, says everybody I've ever met. I'm an individual. I can do whatever I want within the confines of the law. Go fuck yourself, right? But here's the thing. I think it was just given a bad sell. There's no salesman in religion.
Yeah, it's
right?
bad.
So what I would say to these kids is like, they're underprivileged. They're probably on a bad path and all that. And I would bring up certain things from the Bible. I would bring up certain things like, like people usually hate the one, your children will pay for your sins. That really upsets people because they go, what is that? If I break somebody's arm on purpose, how is my son, my hypothetical son in 10 years going to pay for that? It's like, you got to understand the way the Bible's written is not to be taken so literally. Your children will pay for your sins means that if you decide to live a life of crime, if you decide to not get married and you decide to just knock up somebody and then they have your baby and you're barely involved and then you go to jail, your child is paying for your sins because now they don't have a father. And now their life is now going to suffer because of the way that you behaved. That's what that means. Those kinds of things, they apply to all religious pieces of advice. And you got to think about it a little more deeply. You don't have to think about it in such a literal, factual sense. They're meta-truths. They're beyond true. They're more true than a true thing is, because it is what happens regardless of your involvement and regardless of how you feel about the fact. It is something that will just happen to you. So I would urge them, number one, to start looking at religion through the correct lens. I would try to do my best to move that idea towards them at a young age so that it's not just like resentment and they don't understand the stupid text, right? That's one thing. I'd give a little bit of religion in there. The other thing I would give is, I would say talk about responsibility and try to push the idea on them that the more responsibility you have, the more meaning you feel in life. And I think that there's a big misconception today, especially with happiness. We talked about happiness. It's funny how it always comes full circle, isn't it? That it's really not about being happy. Life. You're not supposed to be happy all the time, because eventually you'll just become sad. Because like you can't be happy unless there's no light without the dark.
Happy's a fleeting moment.
There's no light without the dark. You'll never, if it's always light, you'll never know the difference between happy or whatever. So it's about meaning. Meaning is way more valuable than being happy is, because happiness, like you said, is fleeting. It comes and goes. That's why sometimes you wake up, everything's fine. You go, I'm in a shit mood today. I don't know why. And there is no reason why. Maybe there is, but you'll figure it out, and the pendulum will swing back to happy eventually. But the more meaning you have in life, that feeling When I see my family, we had a beautiful day in Montauk for Father's Day. Just me, my wife, and my daughter. And just looking at them two, holding hands, walking down the street, that's meaning. It's not happiness. It's bigger than that. It's this idea of, it's this feeling of community. It's this feeling of, of the future and potential for the future, things that could happen, things I'm responsible for, a reason to be a good person, besides the fact that that's the right thing to do. I'd push that on them, that responsibility. Don't be afraid of it. There's more to it than, it's not a bad thing. You're dying for it, actually, the younger people. Okay, that. And the third thing I'd push on them is, this is a real one, like a real one. I know a lot of people who didn't have a hoe phase. And it's fucking them now in their lives, because a lot of guys I know, not a lot, but some of them that I know, their wife is the only woman they've ever been with. And that's starting to bug them, because they're starting to settle into the idea that this is forever. Oh, a lightning bug.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of them.
That's going to be a nice aesthetic if you can even see me anymore. But the reality is, I think that it's important to get those experiences in your life responsibly, without making too much of an asshole out of yourself, and do it the right way, because eventually, this is real talk. You're probably eventually one day going to wish you did. You're going to one day think back, and it's going to put you in a situation where you want to become a swinger, but the reality is you don't. You don't want your wife to be with somebody else in front of you. You just wish that you did something different in your life. It's important to have a little bit of poison. You can't just be sober and only get set. That's not the reality of the world that we live in. Enjoy your life, have a few drinks, have one-night stands when you're young and when that's appropriate to do, because one day you're not going to be able to do that anymore, and you're really going to regret it, and you're going to end up fucking up a perfectly good marriage for no good goddamn reason, because you were too much of a coward to go out into the world and put yourself out there and be a man. In that respect, be a man. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that that's what manliness is. That's not what masculinity is all about. It's not. But it is, in a way, imprinting yourself in society, on the world, and putting yourself out there to be vulnerable and to open up to experiences. That's an important thing to do, because I know a lot of guys now are having like a quarter-life crisis over it, because they never, they had erectile dysfunction because they were addicted to porn, so they didn't want to put themselves in a situation with a stranger where they can't get it up and be embarrassed. It's like, you got to deal with it. You got to get over that hump. You have to. You have to stare that devil in the eye and just go for it.
It's funny. It just reminded me of the scene in the beginning of Sandlot, my favorite movie.
Yeah.
Where the mom of Smalls comes into the bedroom while he's playing with the erector set, and he's all nerdy and playing with his toys, and she goes, "Get outside, scrape your knees, get in trouble."
She says,
"Not too much.
Get in trouble, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
I want you to make friends this summer,
right.
Lots of them.
So go out and experience the world.
Experience the world.
I mean, when you're a teenager, you inevitably you do stupid shit, but do stupid shit with the intention of trying to learn from those experiences, because like you said with Carl Jung, your life is an accumulation of your experiences and your memories, so try to make ones that are fun, and don't be stupid, but
and then you get to sit down with the love of your life one day and just enjoy and be content.
Yeah,
be content with it, because you've gone through the mill, you've experienced it, and then you find out as you get older too, sex isn't even about variety or the best, it's about love. You gotta love them,
connection,
and you can't know that until you find that out.
That's true. Yeah.
That's
beautiful. Yeah, that's good.
You?
I'll say mine quick, or not even a top three, because I don't know if we have enough daylight here. The main theme that I am probably going to address is that struggle is good.
Yes.
And uncomfortable is good.
Yes.
And to look at life in the lens that everything good that ever happened to you, and anything good that you look back on and relish, was most likely the result of doing something really uncomfortable, really scary, or something that you did not want to do in the first place.
Yep.
So I think it's the same thing, kind of what you said, but it's about putting yourself in the most uncomfortable position, trying to learn new things, challenging yourself, doing something that is out of the ordinary. Your brain loves consistency. It loves falling into the same patterns, and whether it's anxiety or whether it's fear, it loves, or comfort, It loves seeking that comfort and that homeostasis. But you need to seek novelty. You need to seek challenges that are a little bit outside of your reach in order to actually learn and grow and meet new people, experience new things, go to new places. So purposely seek out uncomfortable things. I think that's kind of going to be the message of my thing, and I'm writing on
That's
it now.
a good one for them.
But yeah, I think
Huge.
and I can tie in a lot of different themes to that. Like you said, finding meaning, putting yourself in a service position, whether it's, volunteering or joining a community of some sort where you have to serve others or teach or educate in some way. So yeah, just trying to learn new skills, be curious about the world, and seek out things that are going to be uncomfortable, because the fact of the matter is life is a constant series of uncomfortable things.
Whether you like it or not.
Yeah. Haven't really thought of anything else, to be honest.
Well, you can steal mine.
I could steal yours.
You can steal mine.
Because the last time I did 12 different things.
Oh,
when
Jesus.
I spoke to them. So
12 rules for life, huh?
12, yeah, basically my personal 12 rules for life. So this is sort of like an expanding on that, where it's like more rules for life.
I say, because it's almost like struggle was mine, the last one of mine, in a way, but not really. But just do religion, responsibility, and struggle.
Yeah.
And just the religion thing, you don't have to, but like try to, because I feel like if you take a certain path in life, you're going to end up in a position where you kind of end up going back. Because you know what the reality is, and I heard this, and I'll wrap it up with this. I heard a rabbi say the other day that, when bad things happen to you, like really bad, like someone dies, or you're dealing with loss, whether that's a person or a love or a dog or a job, something that you loved is gone. The reality is that traumatic experience, that pain, is too much for your mind or your heart to bear. It can't process the reality of that. The fact that something's gone forever, you'll never see it again. So you have to go deeper than the mind at that point. And you go into things like faith and love, religion, these things that are deeper than us. They're art. They're art and literature. They're these things that are bigger than you, and they outlive you, and they speak of things that are deeper than the everyday conscious experience in the world. And so as life goes on, you're going to go through things that are just not ideal. They're painful, they're horrible. And then she's looking at him. My Lord, this is all her idea. We're fine. You can't see anything, but so you're going to go through things in life that are horribly painful, and you're going to end up coming back to something like religion or faith, or it's at some point. And it's better to know now as a young man that the right lens to look at those things through than to have to redo it and go reevaluate everything on your own. So I think you should talk about religion, responsibility, and struggle.
I like that.
All right. Let's wrap it up.
Thanks,
if you guys can even
listening.
see us anymore, well, next time we'll have a light out here if we do this again.
Yeah.
And
next time we'll maybe eat some vegetables from the garden live on the podcast.
Yeah. We'll
follow the Mason's Daughter on Instagram.
The Mason's Daughter.
Lauren's
beautiful
garden.
work back there.
Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye now.